The universe had rules. Nice, orderly, sensible rules that had kept interstellar civilization humming along for nearly 12,000 years. Rules like, don't blow up inhabited planets, respect sovereign borders, and the all-time favorite, don't attack medical ships, you absolute monsters. These weren't complicated concepts. Most species figured them out before they invented indoor plumbing. And then humans showed up. Not that humans were the ones breaking the rules, quite the opposite. They followed them with such tedious enthusiasm that you'd think the Galactic Charter was their favorite bedtime story. No, the problem with humans was how they reacted when others broke the rules. Take the Varaxian Empire, a collection of 27 star systems ruled by beings who resembled a nightmarish crossbreed between scorpions and octopi, with the charming personality of neither. The Varaxians had spent centuries perfecting the art of being just awful enough to annoy everyone, but not quite awful enough to provoke a unified response. The Varaxians have deployed mining platforms in our asteroid belt again, a Pellereau diplomat would complain during council meetings. The Varaxians have been intercepting our commercial transmissions, a Delvian representative would add. And the council's response was always the same, strongly worded statements followed by sanctions that somehow never included the luxury goods Varaxian elites actually cared about. So when humanity joined the Galactic Council 78 years ago, barely a coffee break in cosmic political terms, no one expected much to change. Humans were odd but relatively harmless. They had a bizarre fascination with placing themselves in danger for fun, consumed foods that would poison half the council species, and insisted on bringing domesticated predators to diplomatic functions. But their most peculiar trait was their approach to medicine. Humans had turned healing into something between an obsession and a religion. While most species develop medical technology as a side effect of military research, humans had done the opposite. Their weapons technology was a byproduct of trying to figure out increasingly sophisticated ways to keep each other alive. The Galactic Medical Corps, previously a minor bureaucratic office that coordinated quarantine protocols, was revolutionized within a decade of human membership. Suddenly, GMC ships were everywhere, responding to plagues, natural disasters, and industrial accidents with startling effectiveness. Species that had been anatomical mysteries for centuries were being successfully treated by human doctors who seemed pathologically incapable of accepting that some patients were beyond saving. This medical imperialism annoyed some, particularly the Varaxians, who considered suffering a valuable teacher and medicine a crutch for the genetically inferior. Still, even they followed the fundamental rule. Medical ships were untouchable. Until they didn't. The first attack was dismissed as a misunderstanding. A human medical frigate responding to a radiation leak on a Delvian mining colony was fired upon by a Varaxian patrol. The ship escaped with minimal damage, and the Varaxians claimed they had misidentified it as a smuggler. Fascinating excuse, the human ambassador noted during the emergency session. Considering our medical ships are painted bright white with red crosses visible from low orbit and broadcast identification signals on all standard frequencies, one might almost suspect the Varaxian Empire of having the technological sophistication of a toaster. The Varaxian ambassador's skin flushed deep purple, all 14 eye stalks swiveling toward the human. We have addressed the error. The patrol captain has been disciplined. Wonderful. The human replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then we consider the matter closed. It wasn't closed, of course. 3 weeks later, 2 more medical ships were attacked, one destroyed with all hands. The Varaxian explanation shifted from misidentification to claims that the ships were carrying military supplies disguised as medical equipment. The council chamber buzzed with tension as the human ambassador approached the central podium. Everyone expected the usual diplomatic response: condemnations, demands for reparations, perhaps even a threat to reduce trade. Instead, the ambassador simply said, "We understand," and walked out. The council erupted into confused chatter. The Delvian ambassador chased after the human, catching her in the corridor. "What do you mean you understand? They've murdered your medical personnel." The human ambassador turned, her expression unnervingly serene. We understand that the Vraxians have mistaken our restraint for weakness. We understand that conventional diplomacy has failed. And we understand exactly what needs to happen next. Which is Protocol Pandora. The Delvian skin paled to a sickly yellow. That's not in any diplomatic registry I'm familiar with. It wouldn't be, the human replied. It's not a diplomatic protocol. Within 24 hours, all human medical ships were recalled to Earth or the nearest human military installation. The withdrawal was so sudden that several crisis operations were left unfinished, including the treatment of a respiratory infection that had been ravaging colony worlds near the Perseus Arm. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, with the Vraxian ambassador conspicuously absent. "This is unprecedented," the Paleran representative sputtered. "Withdrawing medical assistance during an active crisis violates at least 16 provisions of the Galactic Charter." The human ambassador nodded. "I've had the relevant provisions highlighted and transmitted to your delegations. You'll note that each contains exceptions for cases where medical personnel are under active threat." "But what about the innocent Vraxian civilians suffering from this infection?" asked the Keldari ambassador. "What about our innocent medical personnel who were reduced to radioactive particles?" the human countered. "Nevertheless, we've provided the Vraxian government with the necessary treatment protocols. Their own medical services should be adequate." They weren't, of course. The Vraxian approach to medicine involved a lot of pronouncements about natural selection and very little in the way of actual treatment. Within days, the infection had spread to 3 more colony worlds. The Vraxian Emperor himself addressed the council via hologram, his massive form barely contained by the projection field. "This human tantrum has gone on long enough," he chittered. "Your medical ships will resume their duties immediately, or we will consider it an act of war." The human ambassador laughed. Actually laughed. In the 12,000 years of the Council's existence, no one had ever laughed at a Vraxian emperor. "Your Eminence," she said after composing herself, "your empire has already committed multiple acts of war by attacking our medical vessels. We have simply withdrawn to safer territory." "Then return under Vraxian military escort. We will ensure your safety. Like you ensured the safety of the GMC Nightingale and her 300 crew members?" The ambassador's voice remained pleasant, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "No, Your Eminence. If you want human medical expertise, you'll need to guarantee its safety. And since we can no longer trust your word, that guarantee will need to be enforced." The Emperor's eye stalks quivered with rage. "You think your military can stand against the Vraxian Empire? Your species has been spacefaring for barely 5 centuries. "Who said anything about our military?" The ambassador smiled. "We have a different solution in mind. You see, humans have a long history of warfare, and an equally long history of rules concerning that warfare. The protection of medical personnel is one of our oldest and most sacred principles." "Your point, Ambassador?" the Emperor snapped. "My point is that there have always been humans who don't follow the rules, humans who approach conflict from unconventional perspectives. We've historically labeled these individuals as war criminals. They've been safely contained and rehabilitated." The ambassador's smile widened just a fraction. "But you've created a situation where following the rules has become a liability. So we're releasing them." A murmur ran through the council chamber. "You're deploying criminals as soldiers," the Peleran representative was aghast. "That violates—" "Nothing," the human ambassador interrupted. "They've all technically completed their sentences or been pardoned contingent on their service. They are now civilian contractors attached to our medical corps as security consultants, perfectly legal under the Charter." The Emperor's hologram loomed closer. "You think a handful of human degenerates concerns us? The Vraxian Empire has conquered worlds that would make your criminals weep with fear." "Perhaps," the ambassador conceded. "But I don't think you understand what you're dealing with. These aren't simple murderers or thieves. These are individuals whose approach to warfare was so extreme, so effective, and so terrifying that we locked them away and threw away the key." She leaned forward. "And you just gave us a reason to use them." The Emperor's dismissive gesture was lost on no one. "We will see how effective your criminals are against Varaxian battle fleets." "Yes," the ambassador agreed pleasantly, "we will." As the Emperor's hologram winked out, the council chamber erupted into chaos. The human ambassador calmly gathered her materials and headed for the exit, pausing only when the Delvian representative clutched her arm. "Tell me you're bluffing," the Delvian pleaded. The ambassador gently removed the alien's hand. Protocol Pandora was established 40 years ago as a contingency for exactly this scenario. We've never had to use it before because, until now, everyone has had the basic decency to not attack medical ships. But these criminals, are they really as bad as you suggested? The ambassador's expression was unreadable. "No, they're much worse." At that precise moment, halfway across the galaxy, a nondescript station orbiting a small moon in the Tau Ceti system received a transmission. Deep within its heavily secured levels, cryogenic pods began their warming cycles. Medical staff moved with grim efficiency, preparing stimulants and orientation materials. And in the station's command center, a general stared at the authorization code on her screen, shook her head and muttered, "Those poor bastards have no idea what they've just unleashed." The universe had rules. The Vraxians had broken them, and now they would learn why humans had created those rules in the first place. Not to restrain others, but to restrain themselves. The criminals unleashed. Waking from cryostasis feels like having your consciousness stuffed back into your body through a too small opening. The woman blinked at the medical staff, immediately cataloguing ways to kill everyone using only nearby equipment. "Who broke the rules?" she asked simply. "The Vaxian Empire attacked our medical ships," replied the facility director. 3 vessels lost, over 900 personnel killed. "Sloppy. The Vraxians are usually more strategic than that. They've grown arrogant. And now you're waking us up," she gestured around the facility. "Earth's dirty little secrets. We're activating Protocol Pandora." The woman smiled in a way that made the medical staff step back. "Do we get pardons when this is over, or just slightly larger cells?" "Conditional pardons, contingent on your service and conduct." By day's end, 7 individuals formed the euphemistically named Medical Corps Security Consultation Unit. A psychological warfare specialist who once conquered a planet with teacup images, a corporate saboteur who read alien body language better than translation software, a weapons engineer whose inventions were banned under 16 treaties, a tactical genius with total disregard for convention, a xenobiologist specializing in alien weaknesses rather than strengths, a deep-cover operative who'd gone too native among aliens, and a 7th, quiet, mysterious, with a heavily redacted file. Their briefing was direct. The Vraxians had attacked medical ships, humanity had withdrawn medical support, and now the Empire threatened escalation if doctors didn't return without conditions. "You want us to secure safe passage for the medical corps," summarized the psychological warfare specialist. "The 7 of us against an empire. How you accomplish that is up to you, within parameters," the general confirmed. "Parameters?" the saboteur scoffed. "Minimal civilian casualties, no planetary bombardment, no biological weapons targeting Varaxian physiology, no permanent ecological damage to habitable worlds." "That still leaves plenty of options," the weapons engineer noted cheerfully. They received a Corvette-class vessel named the Hippocratic Suggestion, modified extensively beneath its innocent medical ship exterior. Enhanced communications, upgraded engines, and weapons that skirted legality's edge. A battle-scarred medical officer joined them as an observer, face half covered in healing nanografts. "I'm not here to babysit. I'm here to make sure you understand what you're fighting for. The medical corps doesn't need vengeance. We need to be able to do our jobs without being shot at." "Noble but ineffective without enforcement," noted the tactical genius. "That's where you come in. You're the enforcement, not punishment. There's a difference." "Semantics. The Vraxians won't see it that way." "Then make them see it." The medical officer's eye narrowed. "Make the Empire understand exactly why attacking us was a mistake. but don't make us compromise what we stand for. 26 hours later, the Hippocratic suggestion departed for Vraxian space, ostensibly carrying medical supplies and security consultants, actually carrying Earth's most dangerous humans. Their first encounter came quickly. 5 Vraxian patrol ships in standard formation. "They're hailing us," reported the intelligence operative. The main screen showed a Vraxian commander with purple-marked carapace. "Human vessel, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose or be destroyed." "This is the medical support vessel, Hippocratic Suggestion," the psychological specialist smiled pleasantly. "We're providing assistance to your colonies affected by respiratory infection, PR-113. Your medical corps was ordered to return under Vraxian military escort only. Your vessel will be impounded and your crew detained." "I understand your position," the specialist's voice dripped false sympathy. "But we're not part of the regular medical corps." "Then who are you?" "We're the reason the medical corps doesn't need weapons." The smile never wavered. "You can allow us to proceed to Kalu 7 to treat the infection, or attempt to impound us and receive a practical demonstration of our secondary function. You are one small vessel, we are 5 warships. Numbers can be deceiving. Did you know the average Vraxian has 14 eye stalks but can only process visual information from 7 simultaneously? The others are merely backups." The commander stiffened at this. "Or would you prefer a demonstration?" After a long pause, "Proceed to Keller 7. But you will be monitored at all times." "We would expect nothing less." After the transmission ended, the tactical genius whistled. "Impressive. Think they bought it?" "It doesn't matter if they bought all of it, they bought enough. We have 12 hours before they verify which parts were bluffs." "And by then?" asked the medical officer. "By then we'll be established on Kayla 7 treating their civilians. The political cost of attacking us increases exponentially." "And if they attack anyway?" The 7 exchanged predatory smiles. "Then we get to stop playing nice." A 5-word message transmitted to Earth, Protocol Pandora initiated, proceeding. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor raged. "One human vessel threatened an entire squadron and you let them proceed? Your Eminence, they had detailed knowledge of classified systems they shouldn't possess." "Impossible." "Nevertheless, they knew. And these humans are different. They don't act like medical corps personnel." "Different how?" The commander's eye stalks drew together uneasily. "They showed no fear. More than that, they seemed eager for us to attack, almost hopeful." For the first time, unease flickered through the Emperor. "Monitor them closely. If they deviate from medical activities, destroy them immediately." But as the commander's hologram faded, the Emperor found himself unexpectedly drawn to the historical database on human warfare, a subject he had previously dismissed as irrelevant. The galaxy learns fear. The Hippocratic Suggestion landed on Kalu 7 with minimal fanfare and maximum efficiency. Within hours, treatment centers were established, and the human team was addressing the respiratory infection with typical medical corps thoroughness. The Vraxian military watched, mandibles twitching nervously. "They're just treating patients," reported a confused security officer. The commanding general's eye stalks quivered. "For now?" On the 3rd day, strange incidents began. Military communications experienced unexplained interruptions. Security cameras malfunctioned in patterns that spelled obscene Vraxian poetry when mapped. Senior officers received personal messages detailing private indiscretions they'd believed hidden. The Vraxian ruling council convened emergency sessions. "These humans are implementing psychological warfare tactics," fumed a high-ranking minister. "Against whom? They haven't attacked anyone." "Against our entire command structure. They're creating paranoia and distrust without firing a shot." Meanwhile, the 7 consultants continued their work with unsettling serenity. The xenobiologist analyzed infection patterns, casually mentioning vulnerabilities in Vraxian physiology. The weapons engineer inspected local technology, leaving improved but subtly modified systems behind. The saboteur engaged with civilian leaders, whispering truths that undermined imperial propaganda. The Quiet One merely observed, saying little but somehow appearing everywhere significant simultaneously. Across 16 Vraxian worlds, military commanders found themselves making increasingly erratic decisions. Patrol routes became disorganized, resource allocations favored useless objectives, and through it all, the humans simply continued treating patients. When the Emperor ordered an assault on the human facility, 3 strike teams deployed. None arrived. One reported equipment failures, another discovered their navigation systems rerouted them to an orbital garbage facility, the third simply disappeared, only to be found 3 days later in their ships, physically unharmed, but refusing to discuss what they'd experienced. "This is unprecedented," the Vraxian intelligence director admitted. "They're fighting without fighting." On the 12th day, the psychological warfare specialist requested a meeting with the imperial governor. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. Afterward, the governor ordered all military forces to maintain minimum 10-kilometer distance from human medical facilities. No explanation was provided. The governor refused all communications. Reports reached the council. Vraxian citizens were openly discussing previously forbidden topics: the Empire's questionable medical infrastructure, resource allocation inequities, even the philosophical implications of attacking those who healed. The Emperor himself grew increasingly paranoid, installing additional security measures that paradoxically made his palace more vulnerable. His advisors whispered concerns about his stability. By the 18th day, Vraxian military vessels began avoiding human ships entirely, not just medical vessels, any human ship. The mere sight of Earth identification signals caused Vraxian captains to alter course. "What did you actually do to them?" the medical officer finally asked the 7. The tactical genius smiled. "Showed them what we could do without actually doing it. That's it." "Fear of the unknown is more powerful than known threats," explained the psychological warfare specialist. "We simply help them imagine what humans might do if truly provoked." The Quiet One finally spoke. "We showed them why humans created rules for warfare in the first place." "Not to protect others," the xenobiologist added. "But to protect others from us," finished the former intelligence operative. The Galactic Council watched in astonishment as the mighty Vraxian Empire effectively surrendered, without a single official battle being fought. And the 7 war criminals returned to their ship, wondering if Earth would honor its promise of freedom, or if humanity feared its own monsters too much to ever truly release them. A new understanding. The Galactic Council chamber was unusually quiet as representatives reviewed the reports from Vraxian space. No shots fired, no planets bombarded, no biological weapons deployed. Just 7 humans with questionable pasts who had systematically dismantled an empire's will to fight through what the Pelleran representative kept referring to as aggressive psychology. "This cannot be the full story," insisted the Keldari ambassador, eye ridges furrowed in disbelief. "An entire empire does not capitulate because of mind games." The human ambassador smiled, that particularly human smile, the one that suggested she knew something you didn't and was deciding whether to tell you or let you figure it out the hard way. "The Vraxian Empire hasn't capitulated," she corrected. "They've simply agreed to more reasonable terms regarding the safety of medical personnel." "By remarkable coincidence," added the Delvian representative dryly, "they've also withdrawn from 3 disputed border systems, reduced tariffs on essential medical supplies, and opened previously restricted trade routes." As I said, the human ambassador's smile never wavered. Reasonable terms. Meanwhile, aboard the Hippocratic Suggestion, the 7 consultants were preparing for departure from Kalu 7. The respiratory infection had been contained, treatment protocols established, and local medical personnel trained. Their official mission was complete. "So, that's it?" asked the medical officer, leaning on their cane as they watched equipment being packed. "We just leave? The Varaxians rolled over without a real fight." The former intelligence operative glanced up from a datapad. "They didn't roll over, they made a strategic decision based on a cost-benefit analysis." "A cost they never actually paid," noted the tactical genius. The most elegant victory requires no battle, the Quiet One murmured, speaking the ancient quote as if it were a personal mantra. The xenobiologist finished calibrating a diagnostic device and handed it to a local Varaxian medical technician. They attacked medical ships because they didn't understand what they were really dealing with. And now they do. Now they understand that humans compartmentalize. The weapons engineer dismantled a particularly nasty-looking device that had never been used. Medical corps personnel heal because that's their function. They don't fight because that's not their job. But that doesn't mean humans can't fight, continued the psychological warfare specialist. It means we choose not to. We created separate categories of humans for separate functions. And they mistook that separation for weakness, finished the first woman to awaken, her eyes scanning the horizon where a Vraxian military base had conspicuously relocated itself beyond the new 10-kilometer exclusion zone. The medical officer considered this. So, our greatest strength is specialization. Our greatest strength, corrected the saboteur, is that we lock up our monsters instead of celebrating them, but we know exactly where to find them when needed. On the final day of their mission, an unexpected visitor arrived at the human compound. The Vraxian Emperor himself, without military escort, attended only by a small contingent of advisors and medical staff. The seven gathered in the makeshift conference room, the medical officer standing slightly apart as the Emperor's massive form filled the doorway. "I wish to see you with my own eyes," the Emperor stated without preamble. 14 eye stalks sweeping across the humans assessingly. The warriors who fight without fighting. "We're not warriors," the psychological specialist corrected pleasantly. "We're consultants." A sound emerged from the Emperor that the translation software identified as the Vraxian equivalent of a skeptical snort. "I have reviewed your files. The portions your government was willing to share. You are something your own species fears." "With good reason," acknowledged the weapons engineer cheerfully. "And yet they released you to protect healers." The Emperor's primary manipulator limbs gestured expressively. "This contradiction has occupied my thoughts." The Quiet One stepped forward, drawing all attention. "It's not a contradiction. It's a fundamental truth about humans that your empire failed to grasp." Humans compartmentalize violence. We separate it, contain it, regulate it, not because we're incapable of it, but because we're too capable. The Quiet One's voice remained soft but filled the room. "Our medical personnel don't carry weapons because they don't need to. Others carry weapons so they don't have to. Your empire attacked those we specifically designated as beyond violence," added the tactical genius. "You broke a fundamental covenant. So we responded by showing you why that covenant exists," the xenobiologist continued. "Not for our benefit, but for yours." The Emperor was silent for several moments, eye stalks perfectly still in a display of concentration rarely seen among Vraxians. "You never intended widespread destruction," he finally stated. "You could have eliminated our military capability on multiple worlds. Instead, you merely demonstrated that you could." "Precisely," the psychological warfare specialist nodded. "Actual violence would have been inefficient." Another long silence followed. "The treaty has been transmitted to your government," the Emperor eventually said. "All medical vessels will receive absolute safe passage through Vraxian space. Any commander violating this directive will face immediate execution." "Harsh," commented the saboteur with raised eyebrows. "But effective," the Emperor countered. "Sometimes clear consequences are necessary." As the Emperor departed, the medical officer turned to the seven with a puzzled expression. "So, we won. Just like that?" "Just like that," confirmed the first woman, though her expression suggested it wasn't quite so simple. When the Hippocratic suggestion finally left orbit, a message from Varaxian High Command followed them. "The Empire acknowledges your restraint. We will not forget this lesson." Upon their return to Earth, the seven were debriefed in the same facility where they had been awakened. The general who had activated them reviewed their mission outcomes with professional detachment. "Minimal casualties, no destruction of Vraxian infrastructure, full treaty compliance secured. Congratulations." And our pardons? Asked the psychological warfare specialist. The general slid 7 data pads across the table, as promised, conditional upon ongoing good behavior. Define good, the weapons engineer requested with a smirk. The general didn't smile. Don't make us regret this. As they filed out now officially rehabilitated citizens rather than contained threats, the quiet one paused beside the general. You know they'll need us again, they said softly. The general's expression remained unreadable. Let's hope not. Hope all you want, the quiet one replied, but the galaxy now knows that humanity has monsters. Some will be deterred, others will be curious. The general had no answer for that. In the Galactic Council, the human ambassador finalized the new security protocols for medical ships, now unanimously approved by all member species. As she exited the chamber, the Delvian representative fell into step beside her. You're war criminals, he began hesitantly. What happens to them now? The ambassador's smile was enigmatic. They were never war criminals, merely specialists operating outside standard parameters. And now, they're citizens again. Just like that, after what they're capable of. The ambassador stopped walking, turning to face the Delvian directly. Every human is capable of becoming what they were. We simply choose not to be. That's what the Vraxians learned, and what the Council should remember. She resumed walking, adding over her shoulder, We're not peaceful because we're weak. We're peaceful because the alternative is too effective. The universe had rules. The Vraxians had broken them, and now the galaxy understood why those rules existed in the first place. Not as limitations, but as mercies.